Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Whale Nerds podcast. This is episode 128. My name is Slater, and I'm here with Caitlin.
Hello, and we have a special guest this week. We have John Ryan on from Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. John is a biological oceanographer studying the ecology of plankton, fish, and mammals, primarily through the integration of remote and in situ sensing technologies. Through science engineering collaborations, this research involves advancing methods of sampling and data analysis. So, hi, John. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Caitlin and Slater. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been about a year since we've seen you because you spoke at Whale Nerds Weekend for us.
That's right. That's
you
right.
and
We were
Will.
introducing many to the wonders of whales. We got the
Yes.
chance to meet those people who were riding a high from your day on the bay.
Yeah. Yes. And that was, man, that talk was awesome. I love it when you bring the speakers. It's like so fun.
Oh, it's easy to transport a 200-pound subwoofer, no problem.
It's one thing to hear it, but it's better to feel it.
Yeah. I honestly thought we were gonna maybe break the display case, and I was like, oh my gosh, PG Museum's gonna like ask us to replace it.
Well, it's the only way for people to get a feel for those really low frequency sounds produced by these giants.
Yeah, it really doesn't come through unless you have the proper equipment. So you work at Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, but let's talk a little bit about your background first. So how did you kind of get started in biological oceanography or like science in general?
I was about to graduate from college with a degree in management information systems. And I went and did a co-op job that exposed me to what that's really like every day. And I realized that's kind of boring. And so I changed my major and I thought, I want something with philosophical depth. What could be deeper than the science of life? So I went into biology. My school had a pretty good program in marine biology, which gave me the chance to appreciate research of the ocean. And then I did try terrestrial wildlife biology with a temporary job in Colorado and decided on the ocean. Fortunately, where I was living in Massachusetts, right next door in Rhode Island was an excellent school of oceanography, the University of Rhode Island Graduate School of Oceanography in Narragansett.
Yeah.
And so I applied there and was fortunate to get admitted and study ocean life. And mostly during those years, I studied microscopic life and the physical processes of the ocean that shape microscopic life. But of course, microscopic life shapes all other life. And
Right.
so it's been natural over the years to extend in from the microscopic algae into the zooplankton and fish, and now marine mammals through listening, recording and analyzing sound.
So have you kind of always studied those animals from the aspect of sound, or were you doing like plankton sampling with like nets and stuff too over time?
Yeah, the plankton studies would involve measurements of optical properties that can tell you about the plankton, or a number of people at the institute where I work have developed tools that can open up the cells and use molecular analysis to identify who's there and what they're doing. And so I've had great opportunities to collaborate with that team to study plankton ecology.
Wow.
Awesome. So when did it kind of shift more into like directly bioacoustics, like what you do now?
Well, our institute, MBARI, has a cabled observatory, which is a direct connection to the deep sea. A 52-kilometer long cable connects our lab to an observatory on the continental slope just outside the bay. And, this provides continuous, really unlimited power and communication. So I and others proposed to put a hydrophone on the cable observatory because then we could just stream sound continuously. And at the time we started, it was just a feasibility study. What can we do with this? Let's explore it. But we learned that much is feasible in research and education and outreach when we tap into such a fundamental aspect of how life works in the ocean, sound.
When did you guys start the hydrophone project?
We deployed it July 28th, 2015.
Oh, so
So
it's been a
we,
while.
Wow, 7 years.
yeah, just over 7 years. And we deployed it at right near the peak of the warm blob, the really unusual
Yeah.
physical conditions in the Northeast Pacific. So
That's true.
right away, we were able to capture at least one side of a major change in the ocean. We didn't catch the rise, but we caught the fall, emerging from that really exceptional physical anomaly in the ocean. And not surprisingly, we've seen major changes in the vocal or sound behavior of whales during that time period.
That's so cool.
awesome.
I-
So, oh, go ahead, Slater.
I was gonna say, like, that's such a year to start, right? There was probably so many different things you heard that first summer.
So many common dolphins.
Yeah, true. Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
and just, we're realizing more and more that the acoustic behavior of these animals is really a great window into their lives in general. So they respond very strongly to their environment on every time scale, really, multi-decadal, annual, and even events. And that's what we're learning about most recently, how they can respond very rapidly to changes in the environment. But deploying as we did during the height of the warm blob, we could watch the ecosystem change dramatically and therefore have the ecosystem context for what we're hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of all can come together that way.
Mm-hmm.
So for people that are not familiar with Monterey Bay or like with where the hydrophone is, can you explain a little bit like how far is Smooth Ridge from Moss Landing? Like kind of provide some context as where is the hydrophone? How far down, all that?
Sure. So one of the major distinguishing features of Monterey Bay is that it has a massive submarine canyon incising the middle of it. So splitting the continental shelf of the bay in half, because the canyon comes to the surface right at Moss Landing Harbor, right at the entrance, really. And so when we're thinking about where the hydrophone is, the canyon is a good reference point, because it's not just in the bay, it extends all the way to the deep sea floor, far offshore. But as soon as you get outside the mouth of the bay, if you just go north of the canyon, that's Smooth Ridge. It is a feature along the continental slope, and our recording location, the observatory, is in 900 meters of water. And so
No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal.
Just 900 meters water. It's fine.
Yeah, and well, here's what's amazing. You've got this sensitive electronic device, a hydrophone, or any other instrument, and you simply go down under tremendous pressure of the water above you, corrosive salt water.
Yeah.
You just plug it in and it works.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Well,
But
how many miles of cable is it?
32 miles.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty easy to get a 32 mile long cable too.
Over canyon terrain.
They have a lot of
and-
extension cords.
It was laid in sections by a cable laying ship funded by the National Science Foundation. So yes, it was a big deal.
Wow.
But
That's
it's created
awesome.
this, it's create that investment by NSF really created a collaboration hub where many research groups can come together and study ocean processes, taking advantage of the unlimited power and communications.
Yeah. How was the position selected? Because it wasn't originally a multi-directional array, right? It was kind of more like one unit, and now it's more like an array where you can get directional information out of it now.
Yeah, we started with a single hydrophone, and with that single hydrophone, it accepts sound, records sound that's incident upon it from any direction. So it's an omnidirectional hydrophone.
Mm-hmm.
We can hear a sound and identify it and say, that was a blue whale beak call, but we wouldn't know where that whale is with
Right.
that one hydrophone. That being said, it's an amazing hydrophone, and it's recording at a sample rate like more than 250,000 times per second. It's sampling the pressure signal that tells us about what these sounds are. And that's so that we can study both sounds within our range of hearing, as well as well outside our range of hearing, because that's what the animals are doing. They're
Right.
using sound well above our limit. So now what happened is, in collaboration with researchers at the Naval Postgraduate School, Kevin Smith and Paul Leary, we decided to try out, plug into the observatory, a different kind of hydrophone. And this first one was just a single hydrophone, and it's called an acoustic vector sensor. It measures the pressure signal just like a hydrophone, so you can identify the sound, but it also has an accelerometer, a 3-axis particle motion sensor. It measures the water velocity changes caused by sound itself. And that's what allows you to identify the direction that sound originated. And so you get a bearing on the call. You can say it came from over there.
Okay.
Oh, so I need to get
Slater's
an
mind is
inside.
like blown.
I need to get it. I need to get an admin login. Is what you're saying?
Because like, you
don't
can tell
know.
us where the whales are.
Okay, so here's the thing: is like you've met Kate from Blue Ocean, I believe, but we like a lot of times in the mornings, early in the mornings, Kate will text me or I'll text her and we'll be like, I hear a sperm whale. Like, where's it at? And like, we'll plan to go way offshore that day, but it's like, we don't know where it's going to be, but we'll hear it. But it's like, it's definitely will inspire our, like, it'll change. Sometimes it'll change the direction of our day just by like what we hear in the morning, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's pretty cool.
Well, last fall, we worked with Jeremy Goldbogen's lab and others. Jeremy's at Stanford. And that group does the phenomenal work of putting these tags on the backs of whales with suction cups. They stay on for about a day and they give us a view of the life of a whale from its own back. And we wanted to try to use the real-time hydrophone, directional hydrophone data to say, well, where are the whales today? Where should we drive to try to tag them? And when we tried it during that brief outing, the whales were further north, but we did right away recognize that we can't use yesterday's where were the whales for today.
Yeah.
And you know that. You know that. You've seen how fast they move through this environment.
Yeah.
So we need very much near real-time pointing.
Right.
But maybe one more thought, Caitlin, is a week and a half ago, again, working with Paul Leary at the Naval Postgraduate School, we deployed their new system, which is not one acoustic vector sensor, but 2. Now,
is that why the hydrophone wasn't working the other day?
The live stream wasn't working for a different reason, and it was a sort of a network problem, because this data has to sort of scoot along its path to Shoutcast, where we broadcast. And there was just a temporary glitch that we solved. I think
it's on. I just checked it.
We saw the Rachel Carson, and then it stopped working, and we were like, they broke it.
Okay. Well, really briefly, those 2 acoustic vector sensors together, you get 2 bearings on the same call.
Yeah, so you can more accurate fix.
Yes, more accurate. You can, and Paul describes how you can add the signal and get a clearer signal from this same animal, same call, but also you can look at where do those bearings intersect. Now you have a range. You don't just know the bearing to the animal, you know how far away it is from the hydrophone.
Yeah.
And you can, go ahead, Slater.
That's what I was going to ask you, is like, from the pressure of the sound, can you tell how far they are away?
Yeah, you're on to 2 things, really. If you were to look at how strong the signal is, you might think, hey, it's going to be a stronger signal if the animal's closer and a weaker signal if it's farther away. So you could sort of estimate about how far away is that animal. And we do try things like that, but it's much better to have 2 pointers to the same sound and then get a range from the intersection of the bearings.
Yeah, because especially low frequency sound, I mean, it attenuates for so far underwater without losing that much energy.
Yeah.
Low frequency sound would be harder to estimate without 2 points to reference.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how far away you like maybe the furthest away you've picked up a blue whale on the hydrophone?
For our hydrophone, we can sort of model that. And again, this is like MBARI is where the observations are happening. We're listening continuously. But when we want to understand listening to a population or an individual and how far away it can be, we need other tools. We need tags on animals that we can say,
Yeah.
hey, this animal that was tagged, it called out and it was over here. Our acoustic vector sensor should point to a bearing of 310. Look at that, it pointed to 310. So we're verifying our methods. But the other key one, this is all observational. It's also critical to get the theory. And that's where other collaborators, Tatiana Margolina, John Joseph, they model how sound propagates through the ocean.
Mhm.
And from that alone, you can say, if I'm at this location, considering the properties of the ocean between this point 200 miles away and my receiver, my recorder, and the shape of the continental shelf, will I hear that animal? Or at what sound intensity will be received at my hydrophone? So in answering your question, Slater, there's both observational studies that say, hey, we know we heard these animals from hundreds of miles away, or we heard call and response between two animals that were hundreds of miles away. But it's also great to have the theoretical predictions of how sound moves through the ocean. Then you have a stronger view of for answering your question.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is if we hear a sperm whale on the hydrophone that's really loud, it may still be really far from the hydrophone.
Yeah. I mean, although most of the energy in a sperm whale click, even though it's broadband, most of the energy might be in the 2 to 4 kilohertz range, compared to a blue whale putting out its strongest signal in a B call is around 40 hertz.
Mm-hmm.
So that's much lower frequency and would travel farther. And the other thing about a sperm whale is we'll hear them much better if their head is pointed at our hydrophone.
Yeah.
This is not pointed at our hydrophone.
Last week, I swear I could hear it like echoing off the equipment. It was like on top of it.
I just
Oh,
something's got to
what?
have checked it out.
We have a report from the ship. One of Azure, who works on the RV Rachel Carson with MBARI, he wrote me, and I can give you a day and time. He said they were out there at Mars and they saw a sperm whale. Did we hear it? And
All right, we need some new friends on the ship too, Caitlin.
I know, we need
Yeah,
that
there you
person's
go.
phone number. We were at, let's see, I think the morning of the 19th, I think is the morning that I heard it like on top of the hydrophone. And that's the day we saw the Rachel Carson out there.
Okay, I got this email from Azure Cohen, MBARI. He says, this is on the October 19th, 11:44 a.m.
Oh man, we should have kept going.
Yeah, and so here's his message. Hey, John, we have a sperm whale hanging out at Mars right now. Dove about 15 minutes ago. Hopefully you get some good clicks.
Oh
So
man,
when you say
That's
Mars,
cool.
is that out on top of the hydrophone exactly? Or is that
Yeah.
like on the observatory?
Yeah, MARS stands for Monterey Accelerated Research System, which is the name of this cabled
Okay.
observatory. Mhm.
so does the observatory collect other data besides the hydrophone? Like is other equipment plugged into it?
Yes, for sure. So if you're studying whales and dolphins, you also might want to study the forage species that they rely upon. And Kelly Benoit Bird, who is the director of the research department at MBARI, she really is a leader in the field of acoustical ocean ecology, where you study forage species through active acoustic sensing, through bioacoustic surveys. And in the case of the Cable Observatory, there's an echo sounder there, not unlike what you might find on a fishing boat. And the only thing is it's sitting on the bottom and pointing up. So, and it can read right over the observatory. It can read the fish schools, for example, or any of the animals that are scattering sound. And so that's one instrument that's also on the observatory. There is a small remotely operated vehicle that a school runs on the observatory, and their students can drive an ROV on the seafloor around there, explore.
And it's attached to it?
Yeah,
all the
it's got
time?
what's that?
It's like docked down there all the time.
Yep.
Whoa.
How do I get access to that? I got stuff to do, man.
You got to go back to this high school. No, they actually they let other schools students and drive their vehicle. So let's see what else is on the observatory.
Wait, so question, are they remotely driving it from like a computer, or are they doing it, or they have to go out, this high school's going out on the Rachel Carson?
No, they're remotely driving it.
Wow.
Oh, so there is a website that actually
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
That's awesome.
okay, so to follow up about listening to the forage species, so like schools of fish and krill and stuff make noise, or they reflect noise, or both?
Both. And this method on our observatory is using sound that is reflected by them.
Okay.
You know, it's scattered by them, and it's scattered back. Part of that is scattered back to the transducer.
Slater
Alright.
and Slater and I
Alright,
are
so
arguing about this theory.
Well, here's the thing is, we got to figure out how the heck these humpbacks are literally sitting with me and then beelining it 6 miles and then lunge feeding as soon as they get somewhere. Like, I mean, they're feeding next to me, then they beeline it out to SoCal and then lunge feed again. Like, you know, how do they know this school is right
Can they
there?
like do some sort of basic echolocation, like they're making calls and then hearing the bounce back of the school of fish, or like are the fish that loud? Like, Slater and I argue about this almost
There's
every
just
day.
something more to humpbacks that we haven't figured out, and I'll figure it out someday.
Oh, there's a lot more to humpbacks that we haven't figured out, I think.
Oh yeah.
But you are hypothesis fountains, you two. Just out there with your
We got
careful
ideas.
naturalist observations. It's wonderful. So let's think about those two. One of them you mentioned is described in the literature as echoic perception, where an animal can read its own scattered sound.
Mhm.
And there's some really interesting ideas. Eddie Mercado in particular has put these forward, the sonar model for humpback whale song. And he's even shown how, for example, spectral interleaving, where they can leave a call hanging in the soundscape while they put out another one at a frequency that does not overlap, so that they could collect maximum information from that. Now it's a theory. We don't know it yet, but that is a possibility.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. What I think is more likely, though, is they listen to each other. They recognize the behavior of their own species and other species by listening to sounds produced that travel far.
Yeah.
And so I'll pause there, but there's a reason why I think that. I've got a few things to back that up.
Because that's part of what you just worked on, right?
It's part of a research that's been happening in this Monterey Bay collaborative community over the recent years.
Okay. Well, we have a couple more logistical questions, and then we'll launch into the new stuff you've been working on.
So, question about the hydrophone. So that way I am going in the right direction. Is it about a 15-minute delay? I think you told us at the lecture that you gave.
Yes, 15 minutes, because we record in 10-minute files and we never interrupt the recording of a file.
Okay. So it's about 15 minutes. So whatever you're hearing is about 15 minutes ago. Okay, perfect.
And then how is the data processed? I think you told us during that lecture last year that you have some AI helping, because it's a crazy amount of data, right?
2 terabytes a month from one hydrophone.
Holy moly.
That's expensive, because terabyte, like a 2 terabyte SSD card is $250 or $300. So
well, plus you got to have a backup, and
yeah,
that's just, so how do you guys deal with all that?
Well, fortunately, we have network storage capabilities at the Institute that can handle this very well. Even so, you know, we're up to about 170, 180 terabytes, and keeping that spinning on disk is not easy. And so we actually do have a collaboration with AWS Open Data. They're sponsoring the hosting of our data for global access, and we wrote analysis tools that people can readily pick up and use in the cloud to analyze the data in different ways. And just for example, we wondered, okay, we put all our data in the cloud. Is anyone accessing it? So we got the access statistics for 1 month. That was April of this year. And there were 2 petabytes of access to this archive. So it's clear that making it open to the world gives people the opportunity to use it, and they will use it because it's good data.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
A petabyte is I'm looking this up. What's a petabyte?
Petabyte
Is that just
is
short
1,000
terabyte?
terabytes.
Oh, 1,024 terabytes. Oh,
Wow. So a
dang.
lot of people are using this stuff.
It seems so, and that's exactly what we want, because we can never exhaust all the learning that can come from this data. We don't have the knowledge or the tools, and it's not just scientists we want to be able to access this. It's sound artists, and we even wrote a Python notebook to help people use it for sound arts.
Wow,
that's cool. Yeah, I mean, we reference the hydrophone all the time. We have the website to the live stream on our website. Like, we love listening to it live. And
I tell all my passengers too.
Yeah.
Especially like towards, I feel like I talk about it more towards the fall, just because the humpbacks are starting to, be more vocal for sure. But yeah, like I've even put it on in the morning. Cause I run my trips before all the other whale watch boats usually. And I'll put it on and I'll be like, listen, you could hear the whales, and I'll play it over the speakers on my boat, which is cool.
Great.
So it's fun.
That's a gold star application of our live stream. And we had a realization today. This is maybe not for the podcast, but just for your info. We've been saved by our loyal listeners sometimes. Like, people say, oh, hey, is the live stream down? And we've sometimes realized, oh, the recording accidentally stopped. So that allowed us to restart recording, which we didn't lose that data as much, much data. So thank you, loyal listeners.
There you go.
And what we decided at a meeting today is we're going to put a little contact. If you go to the live stream and you hit play and nothing happens, you can hit a contact and we'll know right away.
Oh, cool.
There you go.
Yeah.
That'll be cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
It'll be Kate, me.
It'll be the 2 of us and Kate. You'll know like instantly. 5 a.m. we're like, that thing ain't working.
I get up early. That's fine.
Perfect. So there's a whole like collaborative network of people using this observatory to answer questions. And you and Will have worked a lot on understanding patterns of blue whales using the hydrophone data. So I don't know if you want to kind of like introduce kind of just the whole project, or how you want to start that with introducing what everybody's doing and what you guys just published.
Yeah, sure. I think I want to start with the concept of community that you introduced, because the Monterey Bay research community is really rich with individuals and labs who have different specializations, different strengths. And we need all those specializations and strengths to understand the complex lives of whales and dolphins, marine mammals, and their ecosystem. So, the labs I'm talking about, I've already mentioned some of them. The Goldbogen lab at Stanford, where they're able to observe whale behavior when the whale's out of sight by putting those tags on, which can measure the environment, the animal's movement, its location by GPS, its heart rate, as they did fairly recently. And that's essential, because when Will Astrike started doing his dissertation research with us, it was Jeremy Goldbogen who said, oh, all right, Will, you're interested in studying whales with this tag data. Why don't you also see what you can do with the MBARI hydrophone, which is listening to the whole regional population? That might be effective. And, Will did such a phenomenal job of bringing together the individual and the population level perspectives for his research. So those, and then of course I mentioned earlier, when we get into the most recent paper, this acoustic vector sensor technology is, it's available to this research team and collaboration because of our friends and colleagues at the Naval Postgraduate School. This is not technology I was familiar with at all, but I love data. And when I got a chance to work with data that could point to whales, Paul Leary set me up with daily files, which are basically, they're matrices of sound energy as a function of time and frequency. That allows me to identify the calls. Oh, a blue whale is calling now. Then I can zero in on the maximum energy of that call, the maximum signal strength, move over to the bearing array that says, where did that sound come from? And just pull out the bearings to whale calls.
Yeah.
But I could not have touched that research without the huge foundation that the Naval Postgraduate School put in place on our observatory.
Yeah.
So these are some of the people. There's John Kalambakidis with Cascadia Research Collective, who he and James Fallbush and Dave Cade and others, Ari Friedlander in this region, people who actually get right up to the animals and, with tremendous skill and respect, they're able to deploy technology on these whales. I'm just blown away by that. And that's an essential window in the research that was just published and in a series of papers that have given us a view of blue whale ecology that we never could have otherwise had.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal to see what the whale sees and be able to understand how the whale moves in time and space when it's feeding. And yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and in the case of Will Astrike's first thesis paper, at least his first thesis paper on blue whales, the key was this: what the tags deployed on blue whales, 664 hours of tags deployed on blue whales, told Will was that something we were hearing in our hydrophone at the population level could be explained by individual behavior. And specifically when Will and I first started looking at blue whale song by tracking one of their calls, it's the strongest, longest duration call that they make, therefore a very good signal for us to work with. And we noticed that there was a seasonal shift in how much the whales were singing day versus night. Well, it was a very clear, robust signal, but we couldn't interpret it without knowing individual behavior. And so Will took all that tag data and revealed that when blue whales are making that transition from foraging, building up their energy stores for long distance migration, breeding, calving, rearing young, they're up here very focused on foraging all day. When you see on the tag that whale dives down repeatedly all day, going between the surface and krill swarms at depth, taking in those calories. And then when they decide to migrate south to low latitudes for the breeding season, one of the tags clearly showed the animal stopped feeding completely. And instead of singing mostly during the night because they were busy foraging during the day, they began singing much more during the day. There's probably a simpler way to say that. I can try that again, but
so it's like when they're traveling, they're more like when they're actually on a mission, they're more vocal. It's like they're singing to the beat, they're cruising.
Yeah, they're cruising. And further, instead of singing more at night, this one individual that was tracked for a month started singing much more during the day.
Wow.
Interesting.
So it's
kind of like, it's breeding time, I'm going to start telling everyone it's breeding time.
Yeah, advertisement is known to occur in the animal kingdom, and maybe it's just maybe it's just warming up to sound really good on the breeding grounds, or maybe it's maybe it's things we can't understand unless we're a whale.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that for sure. Like humpback whales during breeding season, they're singing all the time,
Mhm.
night and day.
Yeah.
And so, and then right now you can turn on the hydrophone on the live stream and they're pretty much singing all the time now too, as they're getting ready to shift into migration and breeding mode.
That's right. We're in a great season for the live stream because particularly for humpbacks, which will come through any speakers, you're going to hear a whole lot of song. Blue whales and fin whales are singing their hearts out as well right now, but you won't hear them through most speakers. So if anyone does want to experience that more full orchestra of the ocean from the baleen whale choir, I would recommend even a simple subwoofer will allow you to begin to hear those blue and fin whale calls.
Oh, that's cool.
Definitely.
So you can hear non-animal sounds as well on the hydrophone, right? Like especially we hear wind. Sometimes I check to hear the wind and I go, oh, it's not nice offshore. It sounds really loud today. Or you can hear the rain, or you can hear earthquakes. We've talked about that before too.
That's weird that you can hear the rain though. I
Is
don't
it?
know why.
I
It
don't
just
think
seems
it's
so,
weird.
well, I guess it's only 1,200 feet up, right? You said it's 300 meters down,
It's
900
actually
or no,
meters.
900
900
meters.
meters, almost
Oh,
3,000 feet.
Yeah.
And, I actually play the sound of rain often so that people get a sense of how well sound travels in the ocean.
Mhm.
Here are these little raindrops, tiny little raindrops hitting the ocean surface, and we're hearing them very clearly 3,000 feet below.
So that kind of comes in though to what you guys you have been studying with blue whales, right? Because are you using data about the wind from the hydrophone, or are you just looking at oceanographic data and like upwelling data?
Well, Caitlin, I'm glad you raise all the different things we can hear because for the earth, sounds of the earth, it is wind and rain, earthquakes, submarine landslides. And for noise from human activities, it's shipping noise and other things. Shipping noise, we heard the ocean get quieter during COVID because shipping traffic reduced. So now the really interesting topic I think you're moving into is if we can hear the wind and the wind drives the ocean circulation that the whales are responding to, are they actually, what are their sensory cues? What are they keying off of? Because they are swimming through a vast ocean to find pretty small scale ocean circulation features within which their prey are aggregated. So every bit of effort they put into foraging will give them much greater gain, much greater energy because the food is dense. So what are they keying off of? Is it the sound of the wind that tells them wind-driven upwelling is happening? Do they have memory of where these filaments of coastal ocean circulation develop so that when they hear the wind, they can right away respond and move over there? Or is it the cold temperature near the surface that results from wind-driven upwelling? Do they swim around and feel that cold water and say, this is probably a good spot? Or are they just listening to each other?
We'll never know. That's the problem.
No, maybe we will know.
I think we have some hints from other research.
All right. Well, I'm excited to learn.
Yes. So I kind of read the paper that you guys have just put out, and I read your press release from MBARI. So what are kind of the takeaways from the latest blue whale work you guys have done? It seems like they do cue on the wind, or maybe all the features that go along with what the ocean feels and sounds like after it's been windy.
Yes. As the title begins, oceanic giants dance to atmospheric rhythms. And what that means is we watched them move. We listened to them move, really, in response to these cycles in the wind that we're all familiar with. And of course, many people who spend time on the water will pay attention to this aspect of the wind, whether it's just I sure don't want to be offshore now because the upwelling winds are so strong that conditions would be really rough. To other people who might tune into it for how that affects fishing opportunities through circulation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I lost my train of thought. So I'm getting it back to your question, which you're going to ask again.
So based on your work that you just did, do you think the whales are directly responding to the wind, or is it all the cues that go with it for the upwelling cycle?
Yeah. I think the key thing that this research showed for the first time, because nobody's tracked a blue whale population this way before.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that through 2 years. And there were a number of constraints because I need to back up to the hypothesis. 3 years ago, Kelly Benoit Bird led a study that showed how krill and anchovies swarm in response to upwelling,
Mm-hmm.
meaning they form really dense aggregations. And for these filter feeding baleen whales, they really need to find these dense patches in order to make the effort of foraging worth it, so they can have a net energy gain. And so with Kelly's findings right in Monterey Bay, we predicted that blue whales and other baleen whales, with their millions of years of evolving to find these patches, would know to move into these coastal upwelling filaments when they occur.
Mm-hmm.
So we did actually predict that, and we just didn't have the tools to study it until recently.
Yeah.
And so what we observed specifically is that when the whales were located within our hearing range, there's only one upwelling center in this region that's within our hearing range, and that's Año Nuevo.
Right.
Where upwelling starts there, it flows southeastward along the coast, and some flows into Monterey Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And what we observed through repeated cycles of upwelling intensification and relaxation is that when it upwelled, the whales moved around the compass into Monterey Bay. We could see the bearings to these calling animals move into the bay, which is very consistent with taking advantage of good foraging conditions. And then we also learned that when the winds relaxed and upwelling was not present, the whales moved into offshore habitat. Then the important thing about that is that region of offshore habitat that we can hear is transected by 4 shipping lanes,
Mm-hmm.
which is ship strikes are a primary threat to blue whales.
Yeah.
And so if we are interested in supporting recovery of this endangered species and fin whales as well, any whales that can be hit by ship strikes, this is really relevant information for informing management.
Yeah, definitely. So the upwelling plume, if I was looking at the map in the paper, so it kind of comes down from Año Nuevo, and there's a bunch of like finger projection canyons, and then Soquel Canyon, that whole area gets washed with cold, nutrient rich water. And that lines up with where we do tend to see blue whales when they show up, right? They're kind of within our range from Moss Landing. It's Soquel where we go look. But do they kind of come from all directions when you're tracking them approaching the area from offshore, or are they coming from somewhere specific? Like, are they always coming from the north? Are they always coming from the west?
Yeah, in this study, since we had to focus on one upwelling plume and the limits of how far away we can hear, all we could hear was that they were clearly moving from offshore, meaning also off the continental shelf in deep water, up into shelf waters and into the bay.
Okay.
Now where they came from, if you look at the amount of calling as a function of time and bearing, you can actually see the tracks of individual animals that are calling, and you can see how they're moving around the compass.
Cool.
You still don't quite have how far away they are to draw them on the map, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
So in answer to your question, I'll bring up another study that's in progress now. We observed during a different year that both blue and fin whales moved into Monterey Bay when ocean physics did something unusual. and in this case, they came from different places. The blue whales came up from the Point Sur upwelling region,
Mm-hmm.
and the fin whales came from offshore and toward a bearing toward Davidson Seamount. But when the physics of the ocean did something weird and wonderful, both species immediately at the same time started moving up toward Monterey Bay. Some of their populations remained anchored and calling in the places where they were, but some of the individuals moved up into the bay.
Like some went up to test it and they're like, let's see how good it really is in Monterey.
They're like, hey,
Yeah.
this sounds weird. I want to check it out.
And that would make a lot of sense later, because what if conditions aren't that good? You don't want everybody wasting their energy going up there, but if it's good and they can vocally signal to each other.
Yeah, no problem, right?
No problem.
Yeah.
Come on
Yeah.
up.
So
And,
like Monterey Bay to Davidson Seamount underwater for them communication, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
They could
Well,
clearly hear both places.
Not nothing, but it's like they just go down to the bottom. They're like, yo, Ted, come hit up this, Carmel with me. It's good.
Yeah. Something like that.
Pretty much verbatim, just like that.
Is it upwelling
But
towards that north part of the bay, like Año, SoCal, that area? Is it just because the way the wind's hitting there, or is it happening? It's happening in Carmel as well, right? It's happening all along the shelf or where it's coming up.
yeah, upwelling can originate along a fairly broad swath of the coast, but there are these, it's a combination of the wind-driven circulation and the shape of the coast and seafloor. So you tend to get upwelling centers, they're called, where the upwelling tends to come to the surface and create a filament that then flows sinuously through the coastal ocean. And for here, it's Point Año Nuevo and Point Sur that are the primary upwelling centers. That said, at other times, the winds blow in such a way that the whole coast will erupt with upwelling.
It may happen there, but then once it's up, it could spread out too.
Exactly.
Like the nutrients spread out, and then everything spreads out, right?
Yeah, and also spreads hundreds of kilometers offshore.
Wow.
But I want to come back to one of your questions, which is, or your description of how they might communicate these things. And the reason I think they're able to listen to each other, of course, within a species, but maybe also between species, is work led by Dave Cade, who was at the time a grad student at Stanford, now a postdoc there. And what Dave did is to bring together all the observations you need to understand why the whales are there and how it is that as many as 40 blue whales will come together in a small space to forage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they observed. That's what they observed from the boat, and they tagged some of those whales. And the key finding from MBARI's hydrophone that Will Astrike led is, okay, these whales came together. We happened to encounter these blue whale supergroups on 2 occasions. What was happening in the soundscape, the blue whale soundscape at the time? And what Will found is blue whales were producing a distinct call type. It's a decall. It's a down sweep from, say, 90 hertz down to maybe 30 over 4 to 5 seconds. At the end of it, the room is shaking with your subwoofer. But what he found is that there was an exceptionally high level of activity of this type of call right before the blue whales came together in large numbers. And that is the interpretation that Dave put forward in that paper. It's an acoustic signpost. Hey, everybody, we found the natural restaurant that is open today. There's so much krill here. I could never stuff myself with all of it, so let's share. And the next time you find one of these, let me know, will you? And these what Dave showed from drone footage from Stanford and Duke as well. They were observing these whales using drones, and you could see 4 giant blue whales all headed from slightly different directions, but toward this aggregation site where foraging was off the charts.
Wow. That's so cool.
See, that's what's awesome about that is I want to go back to all the days that we had like really good lunch feeding and see if the humpbacks were like getting super vocal the day before, or like, you know what I mean? Or like they knew something. The humpbacks move around so much though, but I mean, the blue whales do as well, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just wonder how much more vocal they get right before like a good lunch feeding day happens or
Well,
something.
we're working on the data you need for that. And here's the trick. Blue whale beat calls are easy to spot. They're very distinct. Pretty narrow frequency band. Nothing else really putting a lot of energy into that band except ships sometime, but you can separate those out very easily and only get your biological signal that you want. Decalls are harder because humpbacks are putting sounds into that frequency band, so are fin whales at times. So an algorithm trying to find those decalls, the dinner calls, it seems, are they're thwarted by the complexity of the soundscape. And what we're working on now, Danelle Klein is the lead engineer on our project, and she's working with a undergraduate student at Stanford and with Will A. Strike and myself to help us enable things like machine learning and clustering to distinguish those blue whale decalls so that we can get that time series. And you could go back to your logs and say, were decalls off the charts at this time when we saw the blue whales coming together? So we're getting to that point, but it's always a requirement of developing the methods to get those reliable results.
Right. It's probably, I guess it's not surprising to know that the decall is like kind of messy because there's other whales calling in that same frequency, because a lot of the time, if you see a lot of blue whales, there's at least one or two fin whales around, and there's usually humpbacks around. So maybe it makes sense that they all talk in that frequency band because they do all share the same food item.
That's an interesting hypothesis.
Yeah,
Because otherwise, how would they
maybe-
sort the signal
And
out?
think about it.
Yeah.
That would only be if it's krill, because you're not gonna have the humpbacks, they prey switch, right? But like
Yeah.
the blue whale only eats krill. Fin
Yeah.
whales prey switch as well, but not they're more focused on krill, I guess, right?
I mean, we only really see them consistently if there's a lot of krill.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
That's, wait a minute, let's back up on that. So you only see, of course, blue whales are definitely, they have to prey on krill. Fin whales, it's been questionable whether they have a slightly more diverse diet, but what I hear is they mostly forage on krill.
yeah.
And that fits with your observations?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
there's only one time that I can remember in the last 8 years where we had a lot of fin whales and no blue whales, and that was in the fall of 2016. But we were seeing birds that forage on krill in the same area as the fin whales. So I don't know if it was just a weird timing thing, and a lot of the blue whales were further away and these fin whales just marched in from offshore, which is kind of what we saw, and then hung around for like a week and then dispersed. But for the most part, if you see a lot of blue whales, then you're also looking for fin whales.
Fascinating. Well, another data point for you then, the highest level of fin whale calling we have recorded ever in our 7 years was fall of 2016.
Yeah. That matches what we saw on the
I
water.
wasn't here,
Okay.
Yeah.
right?
No, not yet. I
No,
think
I
you
think I
came like
moved.
a month after.
Yeah, I came in November, so
Yeah. Like late November though.
bummer.
Yeah.
But we had, think about like my video of the blue whale from the drone pooping and the humpback swimming through it, and it's krill. But there was blue whales, humpbacks, and fin whales there that day. That was like 2017.
Yeah.
Or 18.
And that winter through 2016 to 2017, we saw blue whales every month of the year, including like in January. And we were like, what are these things doing here right now?
Hang on. Was that drone footage, very interesting sounding drone footage you just mentioned, was it fall of 2017, like late October-ish? Early
I
November?
think it was spring of 2017 where the blue whale, fin whale, and
Yeah,
humpback
because
were
we were
together.
doing all day trips, right?
Yeah, so it was like May of
It was like,
2017.
yeah, it was spring.
Okay. You're about to be a co-authar on the next study.
Well, I mean, he does have some footage from the fall of 2017 too. I just don't know if it's exactly what you want.
Well,
Yeah.
we should follow up on that because that period is fascinating for the blue and fin whales converging, a strange attractor in Monterey Bay. And, you mentioned prey switching earlier. There's another study we're working on that really is about exploring acoustic behavior of bluefin and humpback whales in relation to uh, foraging ecology and the unique ability of humpbacks to so readily prey switch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know. Was that the same? Is that the same year that I got the humpback lunch feeding on krill?
Yes.
I wish they lunch fed on krill. It is so much easier because, like, the thing is,
from
the
the
school.
drone.
Well, I guess it could be crazier if the krill patch was massive, but like in this day in particular, we had like, I don't know, if let's just say it was the size of like a pizza, it looked like from the drone, and the humpback would just come up and then do a side lunge on this little red circle, and it was perfect. So I could just go from krill patch to krill patch and get it like no problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Easier to line up the flight pattern. So.
Yeah.
I bet
Oh
that's
man,
the
there's
first
so many
time.
cool things.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's the first time that a drone flight maybe was designed that way.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah. Well, that all that stuff is, we could talk to you all night about the hydrophone,
Yeah.
but I feel like this stuff is really cool. Do you have any idea, like, do you have any rare species that the hydrophone is recorded for our area that you know of, like pilot whales or like anything super?
Oh yeah, that we've missed.
Yeah, like I know we have
Well,
beaked whales and sperm whales, and you know.
well, let's actually start with sperm whales, because I feel like one of the unique opportunities of us recording continuously is to really get a sense acoustically. How often do we hear them? How often are they present? Because they do tend to be offshore and they do tend to be unseen. So the reports are fairly infrequent, but Will Astrike just took up the challenge of sifting through our 180 terabytes for sperm whales. And we've been working on improving the methods and, the ground truth, is this really working? And he's now processed a full year of data. And the preliminary result is that we're hearing sperm whales on about half of all days.
Wow.
And that might be surprising.
Say that again. Half of, like, every day?
Half
Like
of all
every
days in
other
that
day.
year. Like,
half of the, oh my gosh.
so I think, sperm whales aren't the most cryptic species visually, but they're pretty far offshore and they are hard to track visually. So if we can take advantage of their powerful calls to better detect them, that's what this first study is about. How much are they really using this habitat? How much of the year? What are the seasonal patterns? What are the interannual changes? Because this ecosystem changes so much year to year.
Yeah.
And so even though they're not the most cryptic, I think they're the one we want to focus on first for odontocetes, because they still are somewhat mysterious visually. And
yeah.
Can you tell the clicks of like the beaked whale? You could tell the difference. Pretty easy.
There are methods to distinguish clicks for sure, and some people have done that with our data. I have not studied odontocete clicks really at all yet. I've focused on the baleen whales. So, like, for example, we initially, when we first started recording, we just shipped a bunch of our data to researchers at Scripps who were already doing that.
To the, was it to like to the Hildebrand lab and stuff?
Yeah, they've got so much good experience with that.
Okay.
One thing that did happen though with a postdoc at MBARI, Sam Ermy, he came and he worked with Kelly Benoit Bird and me. And what he did was to bring together what you can observe of predator and prey in the same place. So at the observatory, you're listening for the echolocation clicks of the animals. And if you hear them and they're fairly high frequency, they're going to be pretty close to your receiver.
Right.
So you've got a pretty local view of the echolocators. And then you've got the echo sounder telling you about the behavior of the fish schools over the observatory. And what he and Kelly showed really beautifully is that fish that are not supposed to be able to hear the echolocation clicks of these odontocetes were diving frantically concurrently when there were bursts of echolocation clicks.
So they're running away.
They are running away, trying to get beyond the breath hold range, perhaps. But there's a lot of it. as every good study does, it answers questions, reveals things we haven't seen before, and then it leaves you with a bunch more good questions. And
That's
so
what's amazing about, I guess, just the ocean in general. Just every time you think you find something, it just leaves you with like 26 more questions.
yep. So, but that was a great study where the odontocete study connected right to the prey field, to the forage species ecology. And so we do want to go more in that direction, and we are going to continue aiming tool development at that growing mountain of acoustic data.
Wow. Cool. Oh man. So before we wrap up, I just want to give you an opportunity to share with people, like, how can they find your work or support your work or learn more about what you guys are all doing at MBARI. You guys you have pretty good social media coverage, but also you guys have like websites and stuff too, right?
That's right. And there's a good connection there. Our communications department does a wonderful job of telling stories from this research, sharing them, and through both, maybe it's just a web story or a press release and social media campaign, but we do try to get share the wonders of ocean life this way. And then other opportunities, this project, the Ocean Soundscape project, has from the start focused on engaging with the public and sharing this new knowledge that we're gaining by listening. So for example, we developed a public exhibit. It's resident at the Sanctuary Exploration Center across from the wharf in Santa Cruz. And there you can get a sampling of ocean sound, including those low frequency rumbles from earthquakes and whales that are gigantic. We did clone that exhibit for the San Simeon Visitor Center, the Coastal Discovery Center, also part of the sanctuary. We just deployed a small version of it at the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History, where I gave a talk last week. And I'll be at their event this Saturday sharing fairly spooky sounds from the soundscape of the ocean, and a continuous audio-visual presentation for 3 hours. And I'll be there answering questions. So we definitely try to get out to events and share all the ways we can, because, how can anyone feel a connection to life that lives in such a different way beneath the waves? It's hard to connect. Whale watching is an amazing way to do that. It engages our sense of being on the ocean and our sight, which is such a powerful sense for us. And yet hearing the sounds produced by the animals is a powerful way to connect. And that's the only way we can both feel the connection and care about what's happening to these animals, and how we can change the way we live to better support their lives or even their recoveries from severe decimation or near extinction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Roger Payne, I think, had it right where he's like, the people need to hear the whales for us to save them, Yeah,
absolutely. You bring it back to the most influential introduction of whale sound to the world, and what a positive impact it had.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm gonna move someone to tears on a whale watch that wasn't already so excited that they're gonna just cry when they see a whale anyway, the best way to do it is put the hydrophone in the water. Like in Maui, when we play the whale song, that's when I get people starting to tear up on the boat, because it's like so visceral,
Yeah.
So people can follow along with you guys. Your website is mbari.org, right?
That's right. Perfect. And I will say we're in the process of reshaping our website, but right now you could search for MBARI Soundscape, and that will bring you right to our content.
Cool. Awesome. Well, this has been so fun. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much for being here.
Totally fun. So when can I sign up again?
Right now. We're ready to schedule you again.
All right. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate your good work, and I look forward to the next opportunity to collaborate in some way anyway.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening.